Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at how to configure a Colorlight card to drive a panel just like this. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to look at configuring the panel that we built a few weeks ago, and I'll put a link to it here. And we're going to connect up our panel to be driven this time with a Colorlight card instead of the hat type card that we used previously. Now the Colorlight card is the daddy, if you like, of all of the panel driving cards. It's a proper commercial product, and it's not designed to be used by FPP at all. It's been designed to be used by things like a sender box like this one. This would receive a DVI or HDMI signal, output it via Ethernet for reception by cards like this. Now, some of the clever guys who look after FPP some years ago managed to decrypt the signal, and they've written it into FPP for quite a few years now. So let's go ahead and go through what we need to do to get one of these driving our panel from a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus or Pi 4. Now the reason I said 3B Plus or Pi 4 is quite simply they're the only two versions of Raspberry Pi with a gigabit Ethernet jack. Now the Colorlight cards require gigabit Ethernet in order to work. They just will not function on a 10100 port. So the Pi 3B Plus, look for the ones with a silver Raspberry Pi logo on the antenna cover in the corner. The 3B Plus and the 4 are the only ones with gigabit Ethernet. It could theoretically work with a gigabit USB Ethernet adapter from an earlier device or from a BBB, but your mileage may vary, so I wouldn't recommend that. So today we're going to go ahead and use a Pi 4. Now, either of these, as I said, will work well. With availability as it is right now, then beggars can't be choosers, so whichever one you can get will do just fine. Personally, I prefer the 3B Plus. It runs plenty fast enough for FPP. It's got enough memory for what we need, and it runs slightly cooler and is slightly less power hungry. So I'd go for a 3B Plus if I had the option, but a Pi 4 will do just as well. Now I've already configured FPP on here just as a base image to get us started. But before we go that far, we need to configure the Colorlight card. Now the Colorlight cards differ from the normal hat, which only needs setting up in FPP. These have their own processor and do image processing on board, so they need to be aware of what type of panels they've got connected to them and how many panels are connected to each of the ports. The software to do that is some software called LEDVision. Unfortunately for Mac users, it is Windows only, and it doesn't even like running on a Mac in one of the emulation modes. It just doesn't play nicely. So you'll need to befriend somebody with a Windows box to get this configured. And as per the connectivity to the Pi, the Windows PC needs to have a gigabit Ethernet connection, whether that be through a gigabit Ethernet adapter on USB or whether it be a native one built into the PC. So before we configure it, let's get the panels plugged in. We'll get data plugged into it over the Ethernet connection, and we'll give it some power. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it some power. I'm using the same power supply here that I'm using to drive the panels. So my trusty Meanwell hiding over there will be doing that task. There we go. So we've got now the version 8 cards and above have the same type power connector as the panels, the JST4 VHN connector, or you can connect a couple of fork type plugs as I'm doing here. There we go, so that's 5 volts supplied. There we go. Now they only use about 0.5 amp of that, so you don't need to worry too much about the weight of the cable that's coming in as long as it's there. Ethernet, I'm just going to use a short Ethernet cable because everything's happening on the desk here. As with any other Ethernet cables, these can be up to about 100 meters or 305 feet, so plenty long enough for whatever it is that you want to do, which means your Pi could be left in the house or the garage and just run a data cable out to your panel. So let's get that plugged in. Now it was worth noting at this point that the Ethernet signal is not your standard TCP/IP type signal as used with nearly every other device these days. So it won't play nicely on your network. If you do plug it in and decide to try and run it through your switch or whatever, be aware that it doesn't play nicely on the network, and you will give yourself a denial of service attack. The first time I did it, I didn't realise what I'd done, and the first thing is I knew the kids came screaming in saying their internet had broken and their kids' YouTube didn't work anymore. And then I unplugged it and it all came back to life. So yeah, don't do that. So yeah, a dedicated cable is needed from the sender device, whether it be the big Colorlight box or whether it be a Raspberry Pi type situation. So my power is in, my Ethernet is connected. The last thing to connect up is the other data cables from the panel here. Now, as before, I'm going to run this. This is a 2 wide by 3 high P5. I've joined the top panels together as one row, the middle as one row, and the bottom as one row. And I've got 3 IDC cables coming in from the back to do that. So the bottom one, the top panel is going to go into jumper number 1, output 1. And the lettering is fairly small on these boards, but they are all labelled J1 through J8. So J2. There we go. And the last one is J3. Done. So we're all connected here. We've got our 3 data cables run into the panels. We've got our power. And before I connect the Ethernet up to my Raspberry Pi, we need to configure this board. So I have a USB Ethernet adapter on my laptop in front of me here, and I'm just going to run a data cable from here into the Colorlight. There we go. So we're now connected to the laptop. So there we have it. The power light is now on the board, and we're ready to configure. So we're going to use today LEDVision version 8.5 because that's proven to be the most reliable at the moment. There are a couple of newer versions out there, but I've not tested them at this time. So having launched LEDVision, it gives us this lovely window of what it thinks should be going on, and that should be matching our panels. But of course we haven't configured them yet, so it doesn't know how to drive them, and that is plainly obvious from the output that we're seeing here. Now, there are a couple of ways of configuring the cards in LEDVision. The first one I'm going to run through is if you don't have what's called an RCVBP file from your vendor. If you have one, we'll run through that. It's a lot quicker, and we'll run through that immediately after what you do if you haven't got one. So the first thing we need to do is we need to tell LEDVision the size in the width and height of our panel. Now this is expressed in a count of pixels. So our matrix here is 2 P5s wide. Each P5 of course is 64 pixels, so that's 128 pixels. And it's 3 panels high. Each panel is 32, so that gives us a total height of 96. So I'm going to go into Control, Screen Size and Count Settings, and I'm going to change the width. In our case it's already 128, so we'll just rekey, and the height is 96. Now I'll just hit Apply, and the little window over here telling us what the screen should be showing has resized. Our panel hasn't made any difference yet though, but because we haven't fully configured it. So that bit's done. Now we need to tell it about the type of panels that are connected. For that we go into Control and LED Screen Settings. The password for this is 168 numerically. Here we are. And that fires up this LED screen settings window. Now we need to make sure that we're set to net card and use net card, and make sure that the network port that you're using is selected. Then we can hit auto select, and it's found it. It's good. And we can then hit detect receiver cards. And there we go. Our receiver card has been detected. So that's good. We're talking to the controller card, to the Colorlight card. We now need to go into the receiver parameters tab. And in here, we're going to tell it once again the size of our panel. So this one again was 128 by 96. Bypass everything in here at the moment, and we're going to go straight down to intelligent setting. And this is where we're going to run through a series of questions that it's going to ask us, and then it's going to do its best to configure the panel based off our answers. So we've gone for intelligent setting. Our width of 128, height of 96. Our module width is 64 because that's each individual panel. And all the rest we can leave alone for now. We're just going to jump straight through. Now the first one is the LED display test. Have we got a number of lines changing from black to white? Yes, we have. Is one darker than two? Yep, it definitely got brighter. What color order are the pixels? So are we red, green, blue, wait for it Greg, blue, and then black or off? Yeah. If they were a different color order, then we'd need to modify them in here, but ours are correct, they're matching. How many rows are lighting on each module? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 in our case are lighting. So we're going to update this with the number 16. Now how many rows are lighting? And we've just got the one row on the top, the very top row. So just one. And now we need to tell it what order the pixels are laid out in on the controller. So the panel that we're interested in is just the top right one, and it's flashing the very top left pixel of the right hand panel. So I can click the top left in this matrix, and it will then move on to the next pixel in the row, number 2, and so on. Now we can do this far quicker than clicking each one if we just hold down the mouse and then drag carefully across, making sure that we stay inside the rows. And you can see that, oh, look at that, see, I've gone wrong. I was looking at the panel. Fortunately, we have a back button here, so we can take the 2 dubious ones back out. And now I can continue. And it's dragging along. And we're going to need to go all the way to 64. So I'm going to stop at 40 and then just use my mouse to scroll across and then pick up and continue. Now, dependent on your panels, your order may well be different. So you need to see what is going on your panel and act appropriately on this page and the ones before. There we go. So we've done 64 pixels across, and now it wants to know about the rows. Now, fortunately, we don't have to go across every single line and do this. We can now just start dropping down the rows. So as we do row number 2, row number 3, and once again, we can drag it down. And we're going to get down to 16. At the moment, that is still giving us some mumbo jumbo. So we need to double check the receiver mapping tab to see quite what's happened. Now, if I look at the receiver mapping here, we can see that this is still configured for 128 wide by 512 high, which of course it isn't correct. So I'm going to click on the square, and that just gives it a red border. And I'm going to change my height here to 96. And click off. And that's changed inside the box here now. So we need to push that to the device. So I'm going to push that. There we go. And immediately our panel has jumped into life. Now we need to make sure that that's pushed on both the receiver mapping tab through Save to Devices and also on the receiver parameters tab where we've got Save to Receivers. Are you sure? Yes, we are. If you don't push it from both of those tabs, then as soon as you turn the power off, the card will get amnesia and it will forget what you've done. So as soon as you turn it on again, it won't work. So that's the long-winded way of setting up your panels in LEDVision. One thing that you do need to be aware of, particularly on a version 8 card, is on the slightly larger matrices, when you've built up to say a 4 high or 8 high or something like that and a bit wider, you might start to get sparklies and artifacts appearing on the display. If you do, then just go up here to data group and change your data group to 32 groups. Save that to receivers. Yes. And that should fix your artifacts. Now that only seems to happen on version 8 and above cards. I'm not sure why, but that's the fix. So that was the long-winded method of configuring a Colorlight card. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to swap the card over for another one that hasn't been used, and we'll go through the quick method if you have an RCVBP file. So I've connected up our new card and I'm just going to plug that into our PC. There we go. And we're ready to configure it using our configuration file that we got from our vendor. Now, once again, we still need to go into screen size and count settings and set the outside specs here for the width and the height of our panel. And we're then going to go into Control, LED Screen Settings, and the password was 168. Because I've already been into it just a few moments ago, it didn't ask, but it would have done if you hadn't. We can now go down to the bottom again, and instead of going to Intelligent Setting, this time we're going to go to Load. I'm going to click on it, I'm going to pause for a second, and then it gives us a few options. I'm going to go to Browse, to my desktop, and here is the file that I got from my vendor. So I can click on that and open. There we go. Now that's loaded the basic specs of the panel in for us. What we need to do now is to set the size and width, the width and the height of our individual panel. So we're 128 wide because we are 2 panels wide, 2 P5s wide, and we're 96 high. So I've set 128 and 96, and I can then save to receiver. Are you sure? Yes, please. And that's just pushing that configuration into the memory on the board. There we go. Now, before we move on, I forgot to change the data groups. Once again, if you're using a version 8 or later card, make sure your data group is set to normal 32 groups. Otherwise, you might see the artifacts. Your profile might already have come as 32, but if it hasn't, then just swap it over. And down to the bottom to save to receivers. Our receiver mapping tab we'll go into now. And this is set from earlier. If it's not got the right dimensions in it for your panel, just click on it so you get the red border, and then you can set the width and height over on the right hand side here. So 128 by 96 for us. And then I'm going to save to devices. And immediately our panel has woken up. So there we go, that's our Colorlight card configured, and we're ready now to move across to FPP. If I just bring my cursor across and move my mouse in front of this panel, you'll see it appear on the screen. There it goes. So that's the Windows side done. We can come out of LEDVision now. That logo will stay on there until we've got the Pi configured and talking instead. So I'm now going to unplug my laptop. There we go, that's gone, we're done with that. I'm going to plug the Ethernet cable in from my Raspberry Pi. And I'm going to give the Pi some power. There we go. So the Pi is now booting up. And as soon as the indicator LED has stopped flashing, we'll get connected to it and start configuring FPP. Okay, I think that's ready for us. So let's get a browser open and point to our instance FPP. There it is. So to configure our panel here in FPP, we're going to go to Input Output Setup and Channel Outputs. We're then going to go to the LED Panels tab. And we're going to start configuring our panel. Now our connection is going to be a Colorlight card, so we'll change HapCat Cape to Colorlight. The interface of the Colorlight card, the one that it's plugged into on the Pi, is in our case is ETH0. I can then check Enable LED Panels, and then we'll start moving down. Our panel layout is 2 panels wide by 3 panels high. And if I scroll down, we can see that the panel layout is currently coming with the defaults. So every panel is assumed to be on output 1, panel number 1. Now in the older versions of FPP, we'd have to manually go through and set each of these up. So output 1, panel 1, and then output 1, panel 2. And output 2, panel 1, and so on and so forth. But of course, in the new in version 6.3 here, we have this lovely auto layout feature. So we can just hit that, say yes. Lovely. And it's configured it all for us. So the top 2 rows of panels are on output 1, the middle 2 are on output 2, and the bottom 2 are on output 3. So that's good. Our individual panel size, what size panels have we got and what scan rate? Our panels here are 64 by 32 1/16 scan. If you're not sure on the size and scan rate of your panels, you can just count the number of pixels, or it should be written in a little line of text on the back of the panel. They normally have the size and scan rate written in. I'll just put an image on now, which will demonstrate where you find it on a sample panel. So we're 64 by 32 1/16. We are starting top left, and that's where we would start when you configure the model in xLights. Your gamma is 2.2 currently, and again, we'll leave that alone for now. Layout we've done. Start channel we're leaving as 1 for now. That needs to match your start channel on your model in xLights. Now I typically leave my panels as the very beginning of my setup in xLights because they don't change very much. I don't go changing quantities of pixels and models and things about much. My panels stay pretty much the same. My pixels will change down the bottom, but panels stay at the top and don't move. And then last of all, our panel color order. Now, if you're not sure what color order your panels are, leave it as RGB, and then we can test it in a second. I think these are BGR, but we'll find out in just a few moments. So that's done. Really quick and simple in FPP there. So I'm going to hit save. And then it's probably going to want an FPPD restart. So we'll go back to top. And there we go. It wants a restart of FPPD. So we'll let that happen. Something's happened because our panel blanked out. FPPD has restarted. And we're ready now to test and make sure that our panels are configured correctly. So I'm going to go to test pattern. And there is the lovely FPP6 test pattern demonstrating that our panels are correctly configured. Now this is telling us, initially the first number here is telling us the row number. So the top 2 are row number 1, the second 2 are row 2, the bottom 2 are row 3, and then the panel number. Now our first panel that's got data cable going into it directly here is panel number 1, and the second panel is number 2. So the second number is telling us the panel number in the row, so number 1 and number 2. So that's working beautifully. We can see all of our panels are on there and all doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. So that's good, our panels are ready. The only thing we need to do now is to make sure that our color order is correct. To do that, I'm going to go into status control and display testing. and I'm going to scroll down to the solid color test pattern. Now I'm going to pull blue back down to 0, green is at 0, and I'm going to test it with a fill color of red. Now when I turn this on, if we got the right panel color order, then we should see a red panel. So let's find out. And that's blue. So our panel order is not RGB. It starts with a B. So I suspected they were BGR panels. Let's try green and see if green is correct. So we turn red off, and then we'll test again. And lovely, we've got green now. So red is blue and green is green. So I don't think we really need to test blue, but we can scroll down and just try it just to make sure that blue is red. And lo and behold, blue is red. So that means that our color order is indeed BGR and not RGB. So I can go back into my input output setup and channel outputs. I can go to LED panels and just change my panel color order to BGR and save. And now once again, it'll want an FPPD restart. So let's just give it that. And that's done. So the only thing left to do is to double check the colors. So we'll go into status and display testing. I'm going to go down to, we'll test red first of all. So let's just check fill color, display testing. And this time it has come up red, which matches what we expected. If I drop red off and change it to green, we get green. And if I drop that off and change it to blue, we get blue. We can then just double check with chase patterns like red, green, blue chase, which you probably won't see very well on this, or a color cycle, so red, green and blue. So there we are, that's our matrix all configured in FPP. We configured the Colorlight card, we did that a couple of ways. We've then run through FPP settings, got FPP talking to the Colorlight card, and it's all ready for our first sequence from xLights. Now in a very quick one I prepared earlier type moment, I've got a sequence already configured for this configuration of panels. So I can just push that using Tools and FPP Connect. There we go, it's found our instance of FPP. Oh, and there's another one that I've got running in test as well, look. So that's the one that we want. We're running on V2, no models, no UDP. Right, just push that please. There it goes, so that's now pushed to FPP. And if I close this down and refresh this page, there is our sequence. And all I need to do is to hit play. And there is our butterfly sequence, xLights' finest demonstration tool. So that's it for this video. I hope you found that useful. And if you've got any questions, concerns, don't forget to ask them down below. Please do like and share, and then have a look at some of our other videos. We're uploading, trying to upload one a week this year, so hopefully we'll have a very good library of things for you to look at, building steadily throughout the year. Take care, have fun, see you on the next one.